Hi guys, this is Angela Sung with the Warrior Painters podcast. Today, in the Artist Spotlight, I interviewed Amanda Lee to talk about her journey on how she became an art director. We also talk about some tips and tricks for getting into the industry. I hope you find this episode helpful, and thank you for tuning in.
My name's Amanda Lee. I studied architecture at Penn State, and I worked as an architect for maybe a couple of years, and then basically moved to LA, transitioned into animation, and I've been in animation for almost a decade. I guess I could go into a little bit of what I've worked on. I started at Nickelodeon as a prop design and background design artist on Monsters vs. Aliens. Then I did some work on Uncle Grandpa at Cartoon Network. Then I went to Samurai Jack for a while, the newest season. And then I was at DreamWorks on Kung Fu Panda Village. Then I went to Tangled at Disney. And most recently, I was on My End of 3, which isn't out yet. That'll be coming out in 2021 over at Netflix Animation. And currently, I am art directing on the shorts program in the development department of Nickelodeon Animation.
Oh my gosh, that's a lot of really, really cool projects and stuff. I feel like the audience might be a little bit intimidated by how cool you are. So why don't we do an icebreaker really quick?
Okay.
Could you just tell us what you wanted to be when you were like a kid?
I feel like I went through all of the normal stuff. I really wanted to be a marine biologist, right, for a while.
Oh my god, me too.
Right, every kid, yeah. Every kid wanted to do that.
Wait. What was your favorite fish?
The one that blew up.
Oh, the fugu?
Yeah. And then also the one that swims sideways where the fins are
oh, those are so freaking weird.
I don't know what it's called, but they look like the weirdest.
How do you do that? Okay.
But they look like the weirdest fish. And they're huge, right? They're giant. And then, okay, so going back, I discovered dinosaurs, right? So that I want to be an archaeologist for a long time, like many children. And then I think the more realistically, when I was in high school, I wanted to be a veterinarian for the longest time. And then I found out I was allergic to cats actually. And then I dissolved my dreams to be a veterinarian. And then yeah, I went into architecture after that.
So how did you come to that conclusion about how you wanted to become an architect, and did you enjoy Penn State?
How I became, well, it's kind of interesting because after my veterinarian dreams were destroyed, I remember being a senior in high school and you're trying to figure out your life, and back then you don't realize life is a process, and you're oh my god, I have to make this decision for the rest of my life, so I remember having a crisis at that time, and I was I've always been interested in art. I've always wanted to draw, and I thought there was a moment where I was oh, maybe I'll apply to art school. And I remember I mentioned that idea to my parents, and my parents said to me in Chinese, but it was along the lines of don't be ridiculous, right? And so I was okay, well, I'm good at math, I like art, and I was well, maybe if I combine those two, architecture is a good fit for me. Mm-hmm. So that's how I ended up there. I loved being at Penn State. It was really I thrive in large settings, and Penn State is a school of 40,000 kids. So I felt I really blossomed there. Architecture school is very difficult. It's very, very.
I could imagine it.
And also I was in a 5-year program, so I was there a year longer than most other students. But it's probably similar to art school, right? I've heard art school is very you're pulling all-nighters. There's a lot of competition. You're constantly trying to outdo other people, stuff like that. So it's kind of similar, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so I think you brought up a really good point earlier. When we're kids and we're in high school, I always feel it's the end of the world if you can't figure out what you want to do. Mm-hmm. I personally actually went to PCC first for an year and a half to really figure out what I wanted to do, but it was really frowned down upon.
Well, I would say for myself, if I could go back to my old self, younger version of me, I would be mm-hmm. Hey, it is serious, don't take it not seriously, but also be flexible, right? Because you're so young, you have an idea of what everything is in this world, but you really don't know, right?
Yes.
So yeah, I remember even in college, I wish I had taken a flower arrangement course. I wish I had taken figure drawing. I wish I had just given myself the permission to like explore all these other interests versus like I felt like I had to take like economics and like a lot of like material science. Like these are things I wasn't even like that interested in, but I
Yeah.
just was taking it because I thought like, oh, maybe I wanted a business degree or like it was very like future focused, which is not a bad thing, but I also think it's just like make sure you like allow yourself to explore different avenues because this whole process is like a learning process.
I totally agree with you. And then I realized even after going to art center that I didn't really want to do game art, which is what I went into.
Mhm.
And I think realizing that this whole art career thing, if you guys want to pursue it, it's more of a marathon. And it's like the first few years are really important, but it's more about your mindset, about like your whole life, right? And that's why I think you're a really great person to talk to because you have a really good work-life balance. You know how to like take it easy, which I'm trying to work on. But we'll get into that later on. Okay, you told me about why you wanted to pursue architecture, but why did you want to pursue animation? Because that's a huge jump, and then you did move to LA for that, right?
Yeah. It was interesting because I feel like back then I was like in my early 20s. I had just gotten my first job in architecture. I had already done some internships, and what they don't tell you is, or I guess it's like maybe implied, is that school is very different from work, right? So in school, it's like you get to design like with no budget, and you're designing museums, and you get to do like like very like I guess I would like high profile projects. But then when you get into architecture, like the field of architecture, there's a lot of stuff that you don't get to do, which is like you don't get to lead design or anything. You're just kind of like you go in as a junior architect and you're like put on like for example, I was designing bathrooms. I was doing like researching code for like solar panels. I'm like picking laying out like reverse ceiling plans, like where the lighting goes. It's like all of the like nitty gritty stuff.
Mhm.
The generally like the head architect is like kind of doing the overall like design development of it, but then there's the rest of the team that has to like make it work. And for myself, um, I think very quickly I realized that I'm more of a big picture type of person. Some people really love figuring out like how like windows fit
Mhm.
into the wall or like how certain details are designed. I
Mhm.
was never one of those kids in school. Like all I cared about was like how does this space feel and does it look like compositionally beautiful? And I think that's why like when I realized after working about like a year and a half of doing like just all these like very, very technical things. And oh, sorry, not to be on a tangent also, but you also realize very quickly that architecture is a lot of paperwork. What they don't tell you is it's like maybe like 10, 20, 25% design, but a lot of it is like calling reps, figuring out materials, sourcing materials, like that kind of stuff.
That's kind of crazy because don't you feel like there's a really big correlation to that and animation? Because I feel like that's you always imagine like, oh my god, I'm gonna be
Yeah.
doing like the sexy concept art
Yes.
pieces, and then
Yes.
you're like, oh okay, I'm just like designing a prop or doing
Yes.
orthographic views.
Yes, I was actually in the car this morning getting coffee, and I was thinking about how we should bring this up because it's very similar to art and work, which is everybody wants to be that visual development artist, right? Which is like the beautiful, sexy shots, and that's great. You might be able to do that, but even the like top visual development artist is still making production work, right? Like,
Yeah, that they
and
never show because it's boring.
right, because
Yeah.
that's somebody who has to, right? Like, you need to create assets that are painted so that when you send it overseas, the texture knows how to texture it. Somebody
Yeah.
has to paint that without lighting, right? It's just like the materials. Or like mouth charts. Somebody has to do mouth charts if you're talking about television. Somebody has to turn all of the characters because when that goes into animation overseas, that's all stuff that has to get created. And
Yeah.
that's like the grunt work, I guess, but
Mhm.
everybody has to do it.
In school, they never talk about this. They just
Yeah.
make you do the fun aspects of
Yeah.
what you're supposed to do at work. That's which is like 10% of your whole project or 5%.
Yeah.
So, okay, so because you had to do so much paperwork and everything,
Yeah.
is that why you decided to go into animation?
Yes. So I think what happened was I was just basically like, this is not a good fit for me. I remember like very one specific day, I was like in the office, I was like looking around me and like everybody just seemed angry. Like everybody in my office just seemed angry. And I was like 23, 24 at the time. And I feel like I had like a flash forward of my life. And I was like, oh my God, I'm going to be one of these people. And this is not to say be like, oh, architects are unhappy or anything. it's just like, I think at that time where we were in our project, everybody was just like so stressed out. And I was like, oh my God, I'm gonna be these people in 40 years, like, or whatever, 30 years. And I think from that day on, I was like, I need to work towards transitioning out of this field because I don't feel happy in this field. I remember like I would wake up and like my alarm would go off, and then like I'd be like, okay, I have to get up to go catch the bus because back then I would take mass transit. I was working in Pittsburgh, and I would be like, okay, you can do it, Amanda. Today, you just gotta get through today. Like,
Yeah, it's so you're like living day by day, and
yeah.
you knew you were unhappy, but what made you conclude to like doing animation? Because it's such a different
Oh
industry.
yeah. Honestly, I did not know that I wanted to be in animation. I just knew that I needed to transition out of architecture. And I remember back then, like when I had that like flashpoint movement moment in my life, I remember I started like keeping a sketchbook during that time, and I would go out during lunchtime and I would sketch. And then I think from that naturally it like turned into like doing a lot of research online. I remember following like a ton of artists on DeviantArt back then. And I was just like, oh man, this is so cool. And I think I slowly started realizing like, oh, there are people that do this,
Hmm.
and I remember being very inspired by Pixar films back then as well. I just never thought that I could be one of the people that could do that.
Okay.
So yeah, and then I actually also had a friend who was in LA who was working in TV animation at the time, and he was like, yeah, he basically introduced me to Concept Design Academy, which is where I met Angela actually, and
Yeah.
then also just the general field of like television animation, and that's when I realized like, oh, there might be a career in this. I'm 24. I have no ties to myself, ties to anything in Pittsburgh, and I was like, if I'm gonna take a risk, it's like now or never, because you don't want like, not to say you can't do it later in your life, of course you can, but it's like that was like a perfect time for me because I had no other obligations at the time. So yeah, basically I bought a one-way ticket. I moved to LA. I didn't have a job. I was very, very naive. I was like, oh, I'm so good. Like, I'll just get a job in like 3 months and transition successfully. And really, I was unemployed for like 9 months to a year. Like, um,
So, do you have any advice for people who want to do something like you? Because I know there's a lot of people that are not in Los Angeles, and Los
yeah,
Angeles is a really expensive
it
city.
is. Yeah.
So, what do you have like to say to them if they are really serious about pursuing something like this?
Not an easy decision to make for sure. I remember going back and forth a lot. So that's like totally normal. I think what really, well, I would say one, you have to save a lot of money. When I made that decision to move, I basically like tried to save as much of my paycheck to give myself a little bit of a buffer space for when I moved. And I always thought like, oh, like if I'm running low on money, I could always get a job in LA in architecture, like if I had failed, or I could get a part time at, like a Starbucks, or that was sort of my last resort, like some sort of retail or like, office administrator job or something like that. But yeah, I would say first and foremost, save a ton of money as much as you can. Second, if you can find roommates, that is definitely going to help you in the long run, because you can, especially people who are maybe in a similar industry as what you're in, though not necessary, because then that will help you save money in LA as well.
And
Um,
then like have motivation and someone to basically check on you to make sure you guys are doing like progressing together.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. I think that fosters a really like healthy environment. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, and then, like the other thing I would say is like take coursework if you can, or find other resources, because there are free resources as well. Like Warrior Painters, for example, is a great resource. We hang out on Discord, and like you can learn a lot of information about the industry that way.
Hmm.
Yeah.
That kind of segues into the next question then. I know you were taking a lot of CDA classes. Do you feel like any of the teachers you had at CDA were your mentors, or do you have any industry mentors? What classes did you take to help you kind of get to where you are today?
So when I came to LA, I only had my architecture portfolio, and I very quickly realized like nobody was going to accept me for that. So that's why I went to CDA. I didn't even know what I wanted to do in animation, so I was taking all kinds of coursework. I took storyboarding with Jay Oliva. I took digital painting because when I came to LA, I didn't even know how to digital paint. Like I didn't know Wacom tablets or Cintiqs were a thing, right? I took digital painting. I took like form language, prop and vehicle design, environment design, and out of all of those sort of figure drawing, a ton of figure drawing. So after taking all of those courses, I think I very quickly realized that I gravitated towards environment design anyways, or prop design. So that was the coursework that helped me basically develop my first portfolio that got me like industry ready. Yeah, I don't know. In terms of mentors, I would just say like honestly, it's like most of my friends that I met in CDA, right? Like people like yourself. I met Christine Bien, Mark Tahey. Like there's so many other people. Steve E. I think like just having people working on things with you, like we were saying earlier, and pushing you to work harder, like
Mhm.
it was really good for me.
Okay. Those are like really cool tips. So, you mentioned earlier that you then realized that you gravitated more towards like doing backgrounds and props. So, how soon did you like realize how important it was that you needed to specialize? Because I feel like
Oh
they don't teach you this in school either, right?
yeah,
Because they make you do like everything, and you think you need to have everything in your portfolio. So, how did you
yeah.
realize that?
I think one was I learned more about the pipeline of animation. Like I had friends who were working in the industry and they explained it to me. Like, okay, it's like like there's like writers and it's like basically a production line. So writers, storyboard artists, and that gets broken out into the different assets and
Hmm.
jobs. And then there's background designer, prop designer. Well, it's props and effects. Character designer, which almost everybody wants to be a character designer. And then there's paint, right? So there's like color design, which is painting of props and characters, and then there's background paint, which is the environment painting. So after they explained it to me that like these are different jobs, that's when I was like, okay, like you need to tailor a portfolio to a job. And that's when I chose like, okay, I'm gonna do like background design, and I started tailoring a portfolio towards background design. I think it's okay to be a generalist. There's nothing wrong with being a generalist, but you're going to be hired for a specific job. So you should definitely be very good at least at one thing. And you can, I always tell people or students that ask me like about this stuff is that it's important to have like expertise in one thing, and then what as you're working and making money and supporting yourself doing that one thing, you can always use your free time to expand your skills into like say you want to do character design also, or you want to do storyboarding or writing or whatever it is, pitching, you know. That's what I would suggest.
One thing that I really like about you, Amanda, is your confidence. I think you have helped me a lot because when you first met me, I was a Debbie Downer and I always doubted myself. So, can
Were
you tell
you?
me?
I
Yeah,
don't even remember that version of you.
well, no, well, it's not Debbie Downer, but like I think I always doubted myself in terms of art.
Yeah.
So, can you talk about how you gained your confidence and how that helped you? And and then could you talk about the pros and cons? And like you said, you go out to ask people questions, and I feel like that's because you have the confidence to go ask. Some people don't have that capability. So,
Yeah.
do you have any advice for people who hold themselves back?
That's like okay, that's kind of a hard question because it's going to be different for everybody, obviously. I can only speak to my own experience. I think it's one of those things that it's like developed over time. I don't even think I'm like super confident right now all the time. Um, but as a kid, I was very shy and quiet as well. So I think it's just been like minuscule little changes. It's like you have to get used to feeling uncomfortable and recognizing that discomfort isn't a bad thing. It means that it's a sign of growth, right? So I know that everybody hates feeling like they don't know what they're doing. They hate feeling like putting yourself out there or forcing yourself to do something with the expectation that like, oh, it's possible that you might fail, right? But if you practice doing these in little ways, you start getting used to or desensitized to maybe the idea of failing and also the idea of like sitting in discomfort.
Yeah.
No, you shouldn't be staying in discomfort for very long periods of time. I think that can be really detrimental. but I do feel like as you grow, like you start building a tolerance for that. So
But
yeah.
that's a really good thing because, like, that's you said it so correctly. Because, like, even when you're drawing, right, like, you constantly get discomfort, but you just have to teach yourself that this is the process.
It's yeah,
So,
exactly. That's like perfect word for it. It's like it's all about a process. And I think one of the things I also want to mention is like you have to be okay with failure. Failure doesn't mean it's the end of the world, right? It feels like the end of the world, but it's just part of learning and part of the process. Like we've all failed, and the more you fail, it doesn't mean you suck. It just means you had the ability to try and learn, right?
yeah.
And that's okay. Like failure, you fail, you learn, and then you move on.
That's a really good outlook on life. And talking about being uncomfortable and failing, could you give us some, like, your own personal experience of how you became an art director? Did you fail sometimes? Did you
Mhm.
doubt yourself? Did you sit in
Mm.
discomfort?
Yes. Oh my God. Every job I have been on, I sit in discomfort, right? I was going to mention earlier also. So one of the things I do that is like talking a little bit more about self-care. So I'll take on jobs that I feel are very difficult. And I will mentally know that I am just going to be uncomfortable in this job. And then usually after that job, I'll try to take a break. So maybe I'll take a job that I know is a little bit easier, or I will just physically take a sabbatical or a hiatus and just be like, I'm not going to work for like 2 months. So yeah, so that's what I would do. So first thing I think I remember I was in Monster vs. Aliens. I thought that was a fluke. I was working on that for 1 year, and then the show got canceled, or
Oh
we finished
no.
one season, they didn't renew it, and I was freaking out, right? I was freaking out for a whole month because I was like, they know that I can't do anything. I fucking suck as an artist. Like I had like major like imposter syndrome. And
Wow, I
then
didn't know you felt like this, by the way.
yeah, this was my first year in animation. Like I didn't, like it's the first year, and I just like transitioned from architecture. I was like, did nobody's gonna hire me. And then at the time, I had a friend who passed my portfolio on to Uncle Grandpa, and so I went from a CG show that was where you were turning sets to a completely 2D cartoony show, and that was a very different transition for myself. And that's and going back to what we were talking, I was in discomfort, right? Like I didn't know the style. I didn't know if I could hit the style. It was like I've never drawn cartoony ever, and you just force yourself to learn, right? Like it's not going to be perfect, right? I thought like the whole first like maybe month, I was like they're going to fire me any day. This is going to happen, like whatever. And then you just I don't know, you have to like trust yourself that you're going to be able to learn because your past experience has taught you you can learn, right? And also that you can be flexible enough that you can work on it.
I think one of my favorite quotes that I heard from you before, like, every time I'm doubting myself, I hear your voice in my head where you tell me, Angela, they fucking hired you for a
It's
freaking
true.
reason.
Yes, it's
So
true.
why the hell are you freaking out?
Yeah, yeah,
But
it's
it's
true.
still really hard to get over.
Yeah. It's
So,
true. They hire you because they see something in you, so you have to believe that, right?
yeah.
Also, and then another example of that, I went from Uncle Grandpa to Samurai Jack. Another very difficult transition for me. Samurai Jack, very graphic. I've never drawn in that style ever, and the entire like season, I was like, I'm gonna get fired. Today's the day. Like I'm gonna get fired, and it was. I would say that was one of my more difficult transitions, and you get to a point where you're like, okay, if they fire me and I fail, I'm just not a good fit, right? It's okay. It's not an indication of me being a bad person. It's not an indication of me being a bad artist. It just means that maybe my skills are not up to par yet. Maybe my design skills aren't up to par yet. Doesn't mean I won't get there. It's just maybe right now, not a good fit. You don't take it personally. They just need somebody that's maybe a little more experienced.
That's really healthy. So after Samurai Jack, you went to Netflix, and how did you make that transition? Like, did you ask to become an art director, or like how did that
Oh,
happen?
actually, I never thought that I was going to art direct. Really, it was never even on my radar. I was a visual development artist at Netflix, so that was like me learning to like kind of actually produce and paint. And then after Netflix, I was kind of just taking a break for a little bit because I was kind of burnt out and just trying to like regain mental health. That's when I basically got tapped for art directing at Nickelodeon, which is my current job.
Mhm.
There are many ways to getting to art director. There's no one right way. For my own personal path, I think it was just me being able to be pleasant person to work with. I think I have a good
So
reputation.
important.
Yeah, I have a good reputation. I think that I am one of those people who are self-motivated. Like, I think people can tell that I'm self-motivated. And I think that I want to believe that people see like leadership qualities in me. I don't know for
You
sure.
definitely have leadership qualities.
Yeah, and I think
I could vouch for
it's
that.
like these are the little things that are built with each team you work on, because you every time you change a team, you're being introduced to new people who will also know other people and who will also go on to new productions. So basically, like, how I got this current position was like I was having a conversation with my who is now my co-EP, right now co-executive producer, or yeah, and he was on an entirely different production at Netflix, and I always make an effort to try to get to know people on other productions. One, because I just
That's
like
really
being
smart.
friendly. Like I just really love making friends too. Like
Yeah.
that's just part of it. Like I don't even think about it as networking. It's just I love talking. I don't know.
I'm like the opposite. I'm just like leave me alone.
Yeah, yeah. Most artists are like, don't talk to me. I just want to do my art, right? Like I'm sensitive, which is fine. Nothing wrong with that either. But I like meeting other people, and I like seeing what they're doing too. And I remember going over to Kid Cosmic at the time, and there were just some groups of people talking, and I just like inserted myself and was like talking at the time,
See,
and
that's your confidence coming in, so it's really helpful.
yeah, yeah. But I think I might have known like one person
Okay,
in that
okay.
group, right? Like there was like one person I knew, and but then like they knew other people that I didn't know, so I introduced myself, and then it's just like water cooler talk kind of. And I remember talking about, I don't know why we were talking about art, but I was basically talking about my own experience of the way that I stay employed is that I'm able to transition styles very quickly.
Hmm.
And I've intentionally put myself in shows on different productions of different styles, so I can always constantly be learning.
Hmm.
And I think like that was just like such a throw off conversation. But that dude that I was talking to was in that group that I didn't know that well at the time, remembered that conversation. And then he became co-EP of Nickelodeon, and then reached out to me because of that one conversation. You know what I mean? And also the impression that I made at the time, probably. But yeah, that's how I got tapped to art direct for the
That
development.
that's really funny. So I just want to talk about like my experience because like you said, you never know when something will lead to something, right?
Hmm.
So for myself, I was working at Warner Brothers at the time, and then I got a call from DreamWorks. The lady that interviewed me was Chris Leahy, and she was like, "Hey, we have background design positions opening up. I was wondering if you're interested." And I was just really honest with her. I'm like, even though this sounds like a really great opportunity, I personally feel like I want to try like more of a higher role, like
Hmm.
maybe art directing. And she's like,
Hmm.
"Oh, we don't have anything like that right now." And then we ended the interview. And then like 3 months later, she's like, hey, remember how you said you wanted to become an art director? And then I became the art director of Keepo like that. So
Hmm.
yeah, I think what you said is really true. Just be a pleasant person to work with.
But I
So
think you should also ask for what you want too. Like
yes.
the reason I got my job on Samurai Jack was I heard through the grapevine that they were hiring. I found out who the production manager was, and I just went to her office and knocked her on her door and was like, "Hi, my name's Amanda Lee. I'm interested in the background position on Samurai Jack." And then we had a conversation about that.
Damn, that's really badass. That's really cool.
But I also
Okay.
happened to be working at Cartoon Network at the time, so it was like convenient that.
That's still badass. Like I would be so afraid to ask. So kudos to you. I think what's really interesting about your career path too is how you switched to so many different studios. Can you give artists coming in like some clarity? Because it seems really scary when you move to studio from studio. It sounds like you're constantly unemployed, right? So
Yeah.
do you feel like the project based things are something to be afraid of? And what do you want people to brace themselves?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think a lot of people don't realize that our industry is production based. So you will always be working from production to production unless you end up on something like a SpongeBob, right? Or like a Simpsons or a Dora the Explorer or something. You know, that's like job stability.
Yeah.
But the majority of your career, if you work in animation, is going to be like either movie to movie, TV show to TV show, you know, web series to whatever. But I always tell people like it's stable in its instability. So you have to get comfortable with instability. That's one thing. But it's always unstable, so it's kind of weirdly stable. Um,
That's a good way to
Because
put
yeah, as
it.
one show is ending, the TV pipeline continues, right? There's more content to be made. There's more shows to be made. And that's when, like we were saying, building a good group of friends, and being pleasant to work with and having a good reputation is very important.
Yeah, that's very, very true. Okay, thank you. So when you were making the transition, was it really difficult for you? And did you have support? And I guess this is something for like people who have parents who aren't supportive or they don't have a support network. How did you have that passion and love to like pursue it, even though you didn't have the support?
Hmm.
Yeah.
Um, it wasn't like my parents were like unsupportive. They just didn't understand. I think that that's something that I just had to like find in myself. Like I basically was like, this is something I want to do, and I believe in myself. I remember having a conversation with my brother, and he was like, "Are you sure about this? Like this seems really risky." And I was just like, I was basically like, I can feel it in my bones. Like this is what I want to do. You know,
Mhm.
there is a level of like you have to believe in yourself, and you have to believe that you can succeed.
Okay.
Um, and that's, I don't know, I feel like that's what helped propel me personally.
Hmm. Hmm.
And then I think also being able to see your progress is helpful, you
Yeah,
know?
that's super important.
Like, yeah, after a year or two, you look back at your old work and you're like, oh, I've definitely made progress, you know? Yeah, I guess that, I don't know. I didn't have, like, in terms of support, like a ton of support. I just have just been working really hard.
Yeah. So you said you saved a lot of money personally, right, to make that move.
Hmm.
I know you're really savvy with money, but did that
I'm
put
not
on
savvy with money.
well, did it put on a lot of extra pressure on you? Like, did you feel like it helped? So I know you didn't really have like support financially or and not too much emotionally.
Mhm.
So did you feel like that pressure helped you too?
Yeah, I think the pressure was always in the back of my mind for sure. But I always had a fallback. Like my fallback was always, I'll go back to architecture, right? Like it's fine. Like this transition back then for me was like me trying and knowing that I tried. And if I failed, then that's okay. I tried. Like going back to what we were talking about before, right? Like it's all about just trying. And if you fail, it's okay. Like you will pivot. You're a flexible person, you know, and it's not the end.
Yeah, and I also think life is really short. You should always just go for what you want in life, right? Yeah.
That being said, though, I think you should always make sure the cards are stacked in your favor, though. Like I wouldn't be transitioning into a pro basketball player, right? Like that's not something that's
Are
like,
you sure you
yeah,
have the height?
like I am very tall, but I'm like not that tall, right? So you know, it's like believing in yourself, right? Coupled with realism, right? You got to be real about look at your own portfolio and then look at the portfolios of the people in the industry, right? Like because that's really important. When people
That's
ask me
true.
like, oh, sorry, another tangent. When people ask me like, what makes a good portfolio, I'm always like, just look at the people who are working. Their portfolios is the standard. So you need to, if you want a job, you have to be doing their level of work.
That's true. Let's get on some more fun topics. How did architecture help you in your animation career? And are you still using those skills and like applying it to what
Yeah,
you do
yeah.
every day?
Yeah, definitely. I think that architecture school has given me a very unique perspective. I think what it has helped me with most is like world building and space. In architecture school, you learn a lot about like space planning and you start developing senses for like functionality and like how to make a building work. And I think a lot of those same concepts translate to designing in like visual develop world building. So like for example, like I was working on a store the other day and then I still think about like functionality of the store. Like when I'm going into the store, what is the first thing I want to see? Like are we thinking like cash registers? Is there a food court? And then I also think a lot about circulation space. So how do these people move through?
Wow, that's so architecture.
I know it is, right? It is. But it's all like relevant, right? Like you should all be thinking about this because your characters, you know, are going to be moving through this space. So you need it to make sense and also visually make sense
That's true.
as you're designing. Yeah.
Yeah, because like I don't think people realize that every single freaking building that we go into, there's a reason why they made the space like that, especially if it's like a museum or something, right?
Just an extra thing. I notice a lot of people like when they're designing younger, greener designers, they don't like think about
They
circulation
don't.
space.
They don't.
They just like put stuff everywhere, and I'm just like, well, where are the people going to move through, right? Like, or they put circulation space, but it's like very narrow. And it's, you need to think about like breathing space for those people too.
Yeah. Then how do you feel like it's different between like architectural design and animation background design then? Because you said it's pretty much the same thought process.
Yeah, I think concept wise or a thought process, it can be very similar. Differences obviously is like architecture. If you build it and it falls on somebody, right, there's a lot of liability there. People die. Um, I love animation because I don't have to figure out details. I don't have to figure out how it's going to structurally be standing up. I don't have to figure out like what is the like electrical stuff that's going on behind the lamp, right? For me, it's like a shape that's crashing into another shape, and that's all you need.
Hmm.
And you get to be more fantastical with it, right? You kind of can like let your imagination flow a little bit more. It doesn't have to be as constrained into the real world.
Got it. I feel like some people think like, oh, because I studied politics before, it's
Yeah,
not going to be helpful for my art career. But I always feel like there's something that helps it. It's like kind of
yeah,
relevant in some ways. So, like
yes.
speaking from your own experience, like I know there's a little bit of relationship with art,
Hmm.
but do you have any advice with them getting over that and having the courage to pursue art?
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it doesn't matter what career you come from, right? Like my friend, a lot of people might know Amanda Jolly, right? She was an English literature major, I think, and transitioned when she was like a little bit later in life too. So it's not uncommon. I think if anything, like if you have experience in other things, it can only be a benefit to you because you have knowledge outside of art. Like a lot of times I tell people like we hire you because not only because of your technical skills in your portfolio, but also because of your point of view, right? Like
Hmm.
we want to know that you can think for yourself and not just like be able to copy other people. Mimicking styles is like the base. If you can bring your own experiences, your own background, your own point of view, and whether that be like you come from political science space or like an engineering space or whatever, that will always in my opinion be a benefit to you because you have a unique perspective that is special to you. So yeah, don't see it as a detriment or like that you're behind or anything. If anything, it's like just added skills, or
And
added perspective.
experience and life.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So, do you ever feel like there's an age for cutoff for learning? Because I know that there are some people who think, oh, I'm like 40 years old. Is it too late for me to pursue art?
I think it's one of those things. It's like you have to decide whether you feel like it's important to you, right? First, that's the first and foremost. If that's something you want to do and it's very important to you, then of course you can still do it. I don't think there's any limit to age for when you want to like transition, or even if it's not like you want to get into animation, you want to just like dabble in animation and just like, or even learn to draw, right? Or get into art or sketching or keeping a sketchbook. There's no age. And like to answer your question, no, of course you never stop learning, right? The people who stop learning are the people who plateau and then they, like it's not good for you. Like you have to always understand that it's a process. Stay, have humility, right? Like you might be better now than like some other people now, but there's a ton of people ahead of you that are way better than you, right?
That's
So
true. That's
like
true.
that's how I kind of like remember like okay, like I'm where I am, which is fine, but like there's a long like so many artists like significantly better than me, right? Like so like Angela's song. So it's
Oh,
like
no, no, no. But I think it's really interesting that people let the age get in their way of determining whether they want to pursue their passion. I was really into Monet for a bit, so I did a lot of research on him,
oh
and
yeah, yeah.
yeah, it's really interesting. Like, did you know he started to get a little bit of fame when he was 33,
Yeah.
and then he started to get like better and better until he went blind. But I feel like age is just a number, right? So yeah, thanks for sharing that. Now, this is the question I'm sure everybody in the audience is dying to hear. But since you are an art director who has worked on several different styles and 2D and 3D, what things are you looking for when you're hiring for your projects or tips that you could give to people?
Hmm. Well, we kind of covered it. Point of view, very, very important, right? Like technical skills, very important. So I think first and foremost, I look for like make sure your technical skills are good. If your skills aren't there, I cannot like hire you. Point of view is second. Like, do you have good design skills? Do you have a voice? can you design in interesting ways? 3, it's like I think it's important to have like some variety in of styles. It doesn't so here's the thing, like if you have one style and you're really good at that and people are going to seek you out for that style, that's totally fine. There's a lot of artists that work like that. But you have to be really really excellent at that one style and people need to really like love hiring for that style. I think the better option is having multiple styles under your belt so that you can be diverse and have a wider range. So if you can get that into your portfolio as well. It's also very specific to the different jobs. So if you're a background artist, right, you need good perspective, good scale, good composition.
Yes,
Um,
repeat those things.
those are 3 things you really need. You'd be surprised how many background artists are not good at perspective and scale.
They
Like
really aren't,
they're
and
not
it
good. I don't know
stresses me
why.
out too. Sorry, guys, we don't want to discourage you, but
But it's just just practice, right? It's practice. If it's paint, I want to see a variety of lighting styles. I want to hopefully see that you can work quick and loose, but also tight. You have good finishing skills. Yeah, I think like that's it. Like design, good. What is it called? Silhouettes. Good form language.
yeah.
Yeah,
Okay, cool.
good variety.
Yeah, it's pretty much the same thing for what I was looking for on Kipo: scale, composition, and perspective. Because I think if you have those things down, it's easier to like address notes. But you're right,
Well,
so
it
many
just
people don't.
means that I don't have to teach you on the job
Yeah.
because you will have the base so I can focus on just working on design, right? Because that's the part that I would love to help people with, like working on, I love mentoring people on design, but it's a little bit harder. Like it's not to say I don't want to mentor other people on basics either, but it's just harder because I have a job to do as well.
Uh
And
huh.
if I'm trying to teach foundational skills, it's like it's hard, right? It's difficult.
Yeah. You're so popular, and there's like a long list of questions. The first question is, did you work on art while studying and working in architecture?
Yes, I did. But not like production art or anything. I was just sketching and drawing and like designing worlds for myself.
Oh, okay. That was really easy. Did it take a lot of job searching and rejections before you got your first job in animation?
Yes, I think I shopped my portfolio. Well, I mean, first of all, I was unemployed for like 9 months to a year, I think. I was shopping my portfolio around for that whole time. And sometimes I would get tests and never hear back, right? Or I would get a rejection. And with my first job in particular, I applied for Kung Fu Panda back then, the TV show. I got a rejection from Kung Fu Panda, but then somebody had passed my portfolio from that rejection pile to another show, Monsters vs. Aliens, and then Frank Rocco was the my first art director who like saw some potential in me and like tested me and then gave me freelance, and then from that freelance I got my first job. So
Oh,
yes,
got
you
it.
do deal with failure. I think that first job is the hardest one to get.
Yeah, I feel like that's what people don't get. Like, but once you have your foot in the door, and like you said earlier, if you're pleasant and you're
Yeah,
pretty
if you're
hardworking,
pleasant and you're fun to like, you're pleasant to work with. Like those are the caveats, right? It's not like you get your foot in the door or somebody helps you get the foot in the door and then you're just like cruising, right?
yeah,
It's like constant work.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so how did you deal with those rejections? Because like, I have friends who tested like 10 times, and then they're
Yeah,
just like, I
it's
don't
tough.
think I could ever get work. So, do you have
Yeah.
words of encouragement for them?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have any good ones. My cheesy answer is believe in yourself, right? Like, it's really hard, right? I understand like rejection after rejection, but I think also be introspective. Like, if you can ask them for a review of like why it didn't fit. They won't always give you an answer because recruiters are very busy, or like our teams are very busy. Um, Two, talk to people who are better than you, or if you have professional friends, ask them to help you work on your portfolio or even look at your tests, right, and see how you can improve, because I think if you're getting rejection after rejection after rejection, that is a sign that you're maybe not industry ready yet, and that's when you need to start like internally looking at yourself and like realistically assessing, do I need to take more coursework, do I need to spend a lot more time on perspective, do I need to spend more, you know what I mean, like what
Mhm.
is it about my portfolio that is lacking compared to professional portfolios.
Got it. Okay, I just want to do a quick plug. Amanda might be doing mentorships later on, so you guys should keep an eye out on that. But you said,
I don't know. We'll see. I don't
yeah,
know.
yeah, you were
It was an
talking about it.
idea that I had spoken to with Angela, and like, oh, maybe because you guys know Angela teaches a really wonderful class. So if you want to learn perspective or perspective or skill or stuff, she teaches a really great course. But like, I was like, oh, like I don't feel like I have the like mental bandwidth or capacity to teach, but I was like, oh, maybe I could take on like mentorships for like one or two people. I don't, but again,
Yeah, they're just like private ones, but I'm just throwing it out there. So if people want to, they should like pay attention to your social media and stuff. That's all
yeah,
I
but
mean. Yeah.
it's not going to be anytime soon because my job is crazy. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Just
it's
look
an
out for
idea
it. Yeah.
thinking about. Yeah.
Okay, so another person asked you about your work on Uncle Grandpa.
Mhm.
Do you know what they saw in you that they wanted you to work for Uncle Grandpa?
I think it was my test.
Your
Honestly,
test?
I think I did the test and I hit the style.
Okay, so you mentioned that the style was different and you weren't ready for the show, thinking that you're going to get fired. So like were you able to pull it off then?
Work really hard.
Okay. Okay. Easy
And hope
answer.
that the work is good enough.
Okay, that's cool. That's kind of funny
Hold on,
that you
let me get a
mentioned that.
better answer to that. Okay, so like realistically studying all of the work that's already been on the show, right? Like always having the reference of that stuff. So like when I joined, there was already some visual development previs that was done. And also they gave me some reference to other artists that they had referenced. So one of the things are very important before your job, study all those if you can get them, right? When you're on the job, study them too. Ask for feedback frequently. If you're getting a lot of notes on things, talk to your art director. Hey, I noticed I'm getting a lot of notes on these things. Like, what are the expectations? How can I improve? Like, are there things that you can see that I can like definitely work on?
The
You are
keyword is
as much
ask.
huh?
The
Sorry?
keyword is ask, right?
Yes, yeah. Yeah, exactly. You are the driver of your own life, so you need to take an active like place in it. So like, don't just sit like I don't know. I can't think of a nicer way to say it. Like, don't just like, like kind of like quietly assume everything is okay. Like, kind of like communicate, right? Communication is very important.
Yeah, communication is really important. Okay, so how many years did you need before you got into art directing? And could you elaborate on how to ask for what you want without coming off as pushy? Especially for girls, I feel like this is an issue because
Yeah.
sometimes I'm like, hey, did you get your work done? If a guy said that, they're like, oh, yeah. Like, no, I didn't. But when I ask, like, okay, are you going on your period or
Yeah,
something?
yeah,
So,
yeah, yeah.
yeah.
So it took me. I mean, I wasn't like actively looking for art directing job. That one kind of just like the opportunity presented itself. That's also part of it. Like, I kind of just trusted the process, and I was like, yeah, one day I'll maybe get to a leadership role. We'll see. I don't know. I don't really care. Like, it'll get there. Um, but it took me like 9 years, 8 years of working as a production artist slash visual development artist, and then I got the art directing role. Asking for what you want. Okay, this is a very like big topic. You are your own advocate, right? Like, it'll be great if you have other people who are advocates for you. I've been lucky also in my life to have people who have recognized like talent, and then like will like pull you up, but it doesn't always happen.
And you should not depend on that happening.
And you should not depend on that happening. It's true. So yeah, you are the advocate of your own life. So you need to. I hate to use the word sell because it's not about selling yourself. It's about like recognizing what your strengths are and expressing them in a way that's appropriate at an appropriate time. So you can't just like walk into the group and be like, guys, my shit doesn't stink. Like, I'm amazing. Like, you guys should hire me, right? You can't do that. But it's like, if people ask you what you've done, tell them, right? Tell them in a confident way. If people compliment you, don't be like, no, I didn't do it. Like, yeah, I'm good at my job, right? Like, I work really hard, right? Those are things that you need to express. Because having ownership of that stuff is going to help you get recognized for these sort of like leadership roles. And also, like, if you don't tell the people what you've done, they might not necessarily see it.
Yes, that's a really good point.
And then I was talking to Jake about this on the Discord the other day. One of the things that I think a lot of artists get worried about is that they get worried that they're like, we all hate that artist that's like, I'm amazing, like, right? Like, they're like the drama
I'm
queen.
not a normie.
Yeah, like, gosh, nobody likes that. But there's a distinction between that and I am good at my job. right? Like that doesn't mean that I think that like I'm the greatest artist out there. I don't, but I am good at my job. I've studied, I've worked hard, and that's totally fine. And that's just confidence and not like inflation of ego.
Yeah, that's a really fine line, but I think it's really important to understand the difference because I really agree with you. You do have to speak up and tell people what you did because sometimes they just take that stuff for granted.
Mhm.
But you don't want to come off as an a-hole
Mhm.
and be like, yo, I'm the best ever, blah, blah,
Yeah.
blah. So that's
I
a
think
really good point.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think a lot of that comes down to language. And then you have to start practicing. And this is a very difficult skill too. You have to practice the language of what you use to express your own like talent, I guess.
Yeah, yeah, without coming off bad. Like I feel like I think too much about it, so I end up just not trying to talk about it at all. But
Yeah.
yeah, I
And
think
I also want to say it's important not to badmouth other artists too. Like that's not a way to inflate yourself either. Like, like we all have opinions on like how Sonic the Hedgehog is, right? Or like stuff like that. Like that's different, but like or cats, right? But like don't be like shitting on other artists.
yeah, that's a good point too. So, okay, how much artwork do you usually do in a workday, and how much do you communicate with the directors, like for I guess storyboard directors during the week
So at my
or
current job
EPs
or
too?
what?
Yeah.
Okay, so as an art director, I don't produce that much art anymore. This is something that you should definitely know if you want to go into leadership or a managerial role. Your job is more to make sure everything is running smoothly, making sure the art is staying thematically on theme. That you're communicating with your, like for example, I communicate with my executives, I communicate with my creators, I communicate with my team, my production team, and I communicate with my freelancers that I'm managing. So like I've been working 5-6 months in this current job, and I've produced like 3-4 pieces of art maybe. I do a lot of notating. I do a lot of consulting with the team, but my job is not viz deving stuff anymore. It's more like giving my expertise with or in conjunction with like the creator's vision,
Hmm.
and directing artists to get close to that vision as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah, art directing is not a lot of drawing, guys.
It's
So
not
if you want to do it, yeah.
it's management. Yeah. It's management, and I would say it's a management, it's problem solving. Those are the two most important things.
Which is really important. So even though you're not drawing, it's like the work, like you're behind the scenes and fixing all the fires that are on fire.
Yeah.
So, okay, so this is a really good question. I have been researching a lot about coursework and I'm overwhelmed. Is it absolutely necessary to take art classes?
I think it depends on where you are in your art path or journey. And I also think it depends on what you want to do. If you're like brand new and you're trying to break in the industry and you don't even know how to draw, yes, coursework is very important. But if you're like, you feel like your portfolio is close, you feel like you're a self-motivated individual, you feel like you can draw, like you can stay on track for yourself without needing that structured coursework, then I think that's totally fine too.
Yeah.
It's kind of, I don't know if that really answers the question, but it's like, and then the other thing is like going back to like what you want to do, because coursework can be very expensive. So take the coursework that you think will get you closest to the portfolio of the job that you want. So if you want to do props and environments, maybe skip the character design storyboarding courses, digital painting courses even for now, because design technically you don't need to paint.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, now for some personal questions, Amanda.
Oh, no.
So, do you ever get art blocks?
Yeah, we all do. Everybody does.
I get it all the time.
Yeah, I guess in relationship to work, what I've noticed for my own process, and everybody's different. Again, I just want to like keep saying like everybody has a different process, right? I notice that sometimes if I get something in and I'm like, oh man, I don't even know. Like I don't have an opinion on this. I don't know. I don't know what to do with it. I often need a day or two to think. So sometimes I'll have to go to my team and be like, I need some time to think about this. If it's like something that I'm designing, it's a similar process. I read all the stuff I need to design. Sometimes I'm lucky and I have initial like vision. I don't know if vision's the right word, but like ideas of like what I want to do. Sometimes I'm just like, I have no fucking idea, right? Um, so what that means for me is I read it and then I take a day or two to think. and it doesn't mean I'm constantly like actively thinking about it. It just means that like I'm going about my business and my day, but I'm kind of like gently massaging it in my brain.
Yeah, yeah.
Because it's almost like I have to feel comfortable with the idea and even just like wrap my head around the idea. And then the second thing I do is I research, right? I do just general visual research. Sometimes I do like, if I need more context for something, I'll do like historical research or whatever. And that usually starts to generate
Inspiration.
some ideas. Yeah, inspiration, exactly. And then like usually that kind of leads you down a path, right? Like you start, like you find one thing, you're like, oh, this is kind of similar to this, and this is kind of similar to this. And then maybe you think of like, oh, this is actually kind of not related to this at all, but then you can kind of smash the two ideas together, and that's where like that creativity comes from. Yeah, so that's kind of how I work through art block, but also sometimes it's just take a break, you know?
Yeah. This is a really good piggyback question. As an artist making art for a living, do you have days or months where making art outside of work is hard? And how do you work through that? So I guess it's more for your personal stuff.
Oh, okay. I just don't make personal art.
You go dancing, right? So like you have hobbies outside of art, which is like
Yeah.
dance, climbing, and everything. But
Yeah,
with
yeah, yeah,
coronavirus happening,
yeah, yeah.
could you talk
Wait,
about
wait.
how your hobbies kind of
Yeah,
help
yeah,
you?
yeah. Yeah. So, sorry, that was like a joke, but it's also like not a joke because Angela knows. Like, I don't. It. You
You
have
do
to
it once in every blue moon.
once in a blue moon. I stream on Discord,
Yeah.
and as long as Angela or Larry is in the background, like keep do or Lyndon, no, don't quit, keep doing it. Then I'm like, okay, I'm just fine.
Especially Lyndon. He always-
Um, but related to that, you have to understand your own bandwidth, right? Like, and that's like where you're gonna have to set your own boundaries. So for some people, it's really important to them to do personal artwork. For me, not as important. For me, it's like I don't want to spend 8 hours a day managing and looking at a screen and looking at artwork and making artwork, and then I don't want to like go home and then come back to the screen and then sit there on my tablet, my Cintiq, and then keep drawing, right? This is
Yeah.
not interesting to me. Um, and it's different for everybody. I keep like always saying that. So for me, instead, it's important to be active. So I normally would climb. Right now, I'm taking the kickboxing class with Angela. I used to dance. I mean, I still dance currently in my own house, in my kitchen.
Yeah, Amanda's a great dancer.
But yeah, like I go out, right? I get brunch with my friends.
Oh man, we can't even do that now.
Maybe I'll do brunch. Yeah, I know. Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, it just I guess to answer that question, it's like if you feel like you don't have the bandwidth, it's okay to not. But if it's really important to you to make that artwork, then maybe carve out some time on the weekend, to do it. Like,
You
but not
have a
at
really good
the expense of your own mental health.
Yeah, you have a really good work-life balance. So I think you guys should take what Amanda's saying and really listen to it.
Okay, like we've talked about this on Discord before, right? Like art is a journey and a process, and it's a marathon. So you cannot burn out in your
And-
like first like 3 to 10 years, right? Like you have to be, and also you have to be gentle with your body, right? Like if you're drawing constantly, your wrist is gonna give out, your neck is gonna give out, you're gonna have lower back pain. Like
You're gonna have a tech neck wrinkles like me.
your body is a thing that can draw for you, so take care of it.
Yeah. This is a good question too. Like, do you think that it is more important to be a good artist or a good leader for being an art director? I think both.
I think both. You need both. But if one has more weight, leader.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
need a good
true.
leader and the ability to recognize good art. You don't even have to be that good of an artist, technically. If you have the ability to direct and lead artists, okay, that's not true. You do need to be a good artist because sometimes you have to do work for them.
Yeah, you have to do a lot of work.
I think what I've learned on this job is that one of the really, really important things you need to know is that you need to be there to support your artists. So my job is to like help. Like if my artists are struggling, I need to double check what I'm doing to make sure that I'm doing all I can to better communicate with them, right? Like I don't want them to fail. And if they are failing, I don't throw them under the bus, right? That is not something that I do.
That's so true. Yeah, that's what a really good leader is. And I know it's really hard not to throw people under the bus, but like even when I was art directing, I thought it was really important to always have my artists' back and
Mm.
then like never throw them under the bus. I think that's really important. And they don't teach you that in school either.
Yeah, it's interesting because a lot of these of artists, you know, they get thrown into these management jobs, and you're kind of expected to learn on the job. And my point of reference has always been my previous ADs and PDs. So I think back, like, okay, what have I loved about my previous ADs, and what have I hated? Like,
Yeah.
there are some like ADs and PDs I've been like, this is terrible, right?
Yeah.
So I try to learn from that, but also I I think that like I might actually need to start reading some more books on like management and like effective strategies in management, you know, because these are things that are skills that should be taught, but like nobody's taught that. You're just thrown into it and they're like, okay, now you're a leader and a manager.
Yeah. And it's sometimes a really big
It's a different skill set.
yeah, it's really
It's
different.
entirely different from art.
The person who's asking this is actually from a business and management background that transitioned into concept art 3 years ago, and he or she got a job as a lead, and then he or she feels like they're a fraud because they feel like their skills aren't as strong. So
Oh, I think it's like don't feel like a fraud. Just because being able to recognize good art is also a skill, so that's good. And
yes,
then
it
keep
is.
working on your art skills, right? Like just keep working. It's all a process.
Yeah, I
Don't
agree with
yeah,
that.
don't feel like you don't deserve to be there because you also have great leadership skills. Clearly, if you come from a business background,
Yeah, and I think that's really, really
and that's
important. So
important too, right? Like
we
not
should,
everybody is going to be able to be like A plus in everything.
yeah, we all have our weaknesses.
Yeah.
Since you work so closely with showrunners, do you know what it takes to become a showrunner?
Yeah, you know, amazingly similar things to like ADing. You need to be a good leader. You have to not throw people under the bus. You have to be really good at communicating. One of the most important things, be a good delegator, right? A lot of
Hmm.
times creators, like the best creators I've worked with, they hire the people that they know are going to do a good job and then they let them do their job, right? They're not micromanaging. They're not like,
Yes.
you need to touch every single part of this process in the pipeline. um, they're more there to like similarly to an AD or a PD, like support the system, and if there are problems in the system, work on fixing the problems in the system, not
Hmm.
necessarily like making art or like, you know, writing. You know, sometimes they write too, I guess, but like it kind of depends, but
Yeah,
good.
those skills are really important. How about like in preparation for like pitch Bibles and stuff like that?
Oh, okay. That's like kind of a loaded question, and I don't know if I'm entirely like qualified to answer that, but I will say like good pitch Bibles, it's important to have a strong point of view. It's important to have strong character development, I think, and it's important to have like really strong characters. I think art is really great, but the story is king. Like I really do believe in development, story is king. So you need to have built a pitch that people basically like when they read that pitch they're like, I want to watch this show already. Like why isn't it made, you know? Like that's what I feel like. Again, I'm not like the most qualified to be answering this question, but yeah. And then I think like sometimes like in our own development, like we have creators that are writers and they didn't have any artwork. We have some that were storyboard artists and they had very loose artwork. We have some who were artists, you know, who had very fleshed out, beautiful artwork. They might have like a really great idea, but like when we're in development, we'll pair them with a writer who can like see that vision. So like a lot of times I think what people don't realize is development is like we're looking for that idea, but we will help you develop that idea too. It's not like you have a full script. Like some people do come in with scripts, but maybe you don't have a full script and but we see something in there and you're also a joy to work with, then we will help support you with, you know, like that's why I exist, right? Like I'm an AD to help you support that vision.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, so there's this person who personally likes doing the grunt work. Is it
Hmm.
possible to do that more than the high profile production paintings?
Yep. There's totally plenty of space for that too. A lot of people I know, they love their work-life balance. They have no interest in being in a leadership skill because it's very stressful and puts a lot of pressure on you. So they continue to take positions that are more, I would say, like my trajectory has been a lot more like the like going up, but like they take more of a lateral. Like it doesn't mean that their skills aren't getting better. It just means that they're staying in that same position, right? Like layout artists, and then they'll do layout artists on a different show, and a layout artist on maybe a different style or something like that. Yeah. So you can totally live there and be a fully functioning artist and get paid, and it's okay too.
Yeah, that's true. When you want to apply for the location department, what type of prop design are you looking for? I don't know what a location
I
department
think it
is.
means environment design.
Okay, yeah.
So typically, I would say environment designers can also prop design. Not always
Yes.
the case, but most of the time. Sometimes like very complicated props, like like giant ships or something like that, maybe are better for a prop designer. For a prop design portfolio, I think it's important to show a variety of shape language, show that you have good design skills and volumetric drawing.
Hmm.
But I think a lot of the mistakes I see is that people think props are like coffee mugs and fire hydrants and backpacks, right? And like the most well designed, creatively designed backpack, amazing. But I also need to see that spaceship, right? Like I need to see the pirate ship. I need to see the exploded, damaged car, like the ones that are like,
Turned.
going to be really difficult, because a prop designer is not just going to be like yeah, a lot of things you get are going to be like street lamp or like whatever, but stapler, right? But you're also going to be like, oh, like in Rick and Morty, the spaceship is shot down and then explodes and then floats and then gets reconformed again. Like
Those are all props that we all have to
those are all
design.
props too. So like, yeah, definitely show that range.
Okay, that's good advice. Okay, what's the difference between background layout and design? In a background layout portfolio, is one also expected to include callouts and orthographic views? I could talk a little bit
Yeah, you
about
can answer
this.
that one.
For me personally, I think the biggest difference between design is you're designing a set and a location where you could hand it to the overseas studios so they understand what they're working with. A background layout is specific to what's happening within the animation. So all the backgrounds you see behind the characters, that's usually the two differences. And then you also have to figure out scale and everything as well.
I think another difference is if we're talking feature or television animation.
Oh, that was for TV. And well, that's for traditional Japanese animation. So like feature, the thing that I just talked about, but you could talk about what it is, the difference like.
Just for what I'm thinking about portfolio for TV versus portfolio for feature, they're a little bit different. And also portfolio for CG versus portfolio for 2D is two very different things. You can have both. I think that's totally fine. If anything, it makes you just more employable. But I think when you're talking about the call outs and the material references and terms and stuff, that's definitely more specific to a CG show. And if that's something that you're interested in doing, and just keep in mind, you will get hired to do this, so be prepared to do it all the time. So if you don't want to be
That's
doing
true.
it,
Don't
don't put it in your
portfolio.
portfolio because you will get a job where you're turning sets all the time. And if you hate doing that, don't put it in your portfolio.
That's good advice too, guys. Listen to what I'm going to say.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And then I was gonna say for 2D television animation, it's more just layouts that are flat, compositions.
No color.
Doesn't need call outs, doesn't need paint, doesn't need any sort of like turning or anything. Just flat 2D. Show me that you can design. Show me that you have good composition.
Yeah.
And then visual development is everything.
Yeah. You got to have a lot of great paintings there too. So
Visual development typically you don't have to have like painting's like definitely the icing on the cake if you can do it. But like Armin Serrano, it works mostly in just grayscale, but he can paint too. So
that's technically painting though, in my opinion. Like he's painting in values. That's all I see.
yeah, you're painting in values. So you need to understand values, not maybe necessarily color. But he's like kind of like so
A
good at
special case.
design that he
Yeah.
can just do that. Because sometimes in the feature world they will pair a designer with a painter together. That is a thing too. But if you want to be like the ultimate like visual development artist, right? You want to design well and paint well.
Yeah. Another question about portfolio. What does a color design and background paint portfolio look like compared to a background design portfolio?
Do you want to answer that one too?
Okay, so basically, for color design, we used to color. call it color styling. It's basically where you take a character sheet or a prop sheet and then you color it. That's first step of it. And then afterwards, if you have a higher costing production, they'll usually ask you to place the characters on top of your backgrounds to see if they fit within the environment. So the colors are cohesive. And for background paint versus background design, it's just you have a painted background versus a line drawn background. So
design usually does not include color at all. Like design, when I'm looking at design portfolios, they're just black and white lines. And then when I'm looking at a paint portfolio, I'm only looking at color and lighting.
yeah. So I guess that's what I really focus on too when I'm looking at background paint portfolios. Can you understand color relationships, and then lighting is really important. If you could do it all over again, would you have dropped out of architecture and pursued art from the get-go?
Oh, that is a tough question. I have often asked myself that, like, what would my life be like? How would it be different if I had dropped out? Because my second year, I had literally, I remember like I was pulling my like, I don't know, 12th all-nighter, and I was like laying on like the studio couch, and I was like, I'm done. Like, I'm just not coming back to this. Like, I'm done. I was gonna like legit quit architecture because I realized by second year I was like, I don't think I really like this. And I remember like I told my mom, and she was like, "You're already 2 years into this. Are you crazy?" Because I was thinking about switching into art. I don't have an answer to that question. I would probably say no. I wouldn't do it because I got to where I am now, right? Based on all of our experiences, we are who we are because of the building of all of the experiences we've had. If I had quit and gone into art school, I don't know. Maybe I would be something completely different. I don't know. It could be better, it could be worse, but it would just be different, right? Like I don't know.
Well, July is asking because she's in the same spot, and then
Oh, I saw in here she quit second or third year in March, landscape architecture. I almost thought about going into landscape architecture too. I was like, oh, like I hate this. I'd rather be drawing trees. Oh, maybe landscape architecture is for me.
Wait, Larch is landscape architecture?
Yeah,
okay, cool.
Arch is architectural, landscape architecture. But like there was always this like, and you know, like maybe it was the same at her school, but like architects always like look down at like landscape architects as like the architects that couldn't make it. Like you're not good enough to do architecture, so no.
Dude, that's like feature artists looking down on you.
Yeah, and it's just complete bullshit, right? Like I think in many ways landscape architecture is super fun and amazing. Who doesn't want to design like beautiful like promenades of gardens and in for a museum, or like, you know, like, and you get to know so much like knowledge about nature and specific plants that are like local to your area, for example, and like what the different properties of certain plants are.
Damn, I wish I knew that stuff. That sounds way
Yeah.
cool.
Again,
uh,
all this information would be great for design, right? If you start designing environments too.
oh, I see. Oh, how about your plein air experience?
What about my plein air
How did
experience?
it help you? Why did you start, and did it help you, I guess?
I started plein air painting because I just like painting in general. I've always liked working. I predominantly work in watercolor. I'm not like, I wouldn't say like I'm a serious plein air artist at all, but I do enjoy like anywhere I'm going. If I know I'm gonna have time to like sit for a while, then I'll bring my like small little watercolor set, and I'll try to do a little study of where I am. I think it's helped out in that. Okay, so I would say two things. One, it helps you view the world in a very specific way, and it's what you're putting down on paper is your interpretation of what's you're seeing. So it helps you develop your observation skills and your own design sense. I think
Yes.
that's number one. And two, I think it gets you comfortable with mixing colors, even though the actual color might not translate to digital color. Understanding if you need more reds, more blues, cooler or warmer is applicable to when you're digital painting. So I
That's
think
good
that
advice. Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
I think that's applicable. So that's why I think plein air has been helpful in my own life.
Okay, cool. Awesome. Yay, plein air for life. Okay.
Yeah, for
So
life.
this is a really good question. Since classes and industry events aren't in person this year, how should artists go about networking?
Mm.
Discord.
Discord, yeah. I mean, I hang out on that Discord like almost every day because I honestly like need a mental break sometimes, and I need to talk to somebody. So that's been really great. I will say, like currently, I don't know if this will always be the case in the future, but currently have an Instagram that you are posting your best and most relevant work right now. I have hired off of Instagram multiple times. I get recruiters that send me Instagram profiles. Portfolio, very important, but I almost want to say Instagram also equally important at this point. I had one situation where I was looking for a very specific style. I couldn't find it, and it was like Memorial Day weekend or something. And I remember people were graduating, and one of the illustrators that I was following reposted somebody's graduation project. And when I saw it, I was like, I need to find out who this artist is because the style is so unique to what I wanted or was looking for. So we reached out to her, and now she's like basically helping us right now. So I think that's the best way to network right now is Instagram.
Yeah, that's really true. And everybody's hiring off of Instagram and Twitter, it seems like. So take that advice, guys.
Oh, wait. One thing though.
Okay, go ahead.
Do not blast networking questions to professional artists. If you're going to ask a question, okay, it's fine to do so via DMs. Just introduce yourself, demonstrate that you have done the work and that you have researched the topic, and then ask very, very specific questions. Because artists are professionals and they do not have the time to answer 12 questions from 12 green artists or trying to network with me. Okay, so just keep that in mind.
Yeah, I get on Instagram, I always get like questions like, what colors do you use? Like not even like, hi, my name is blah, blah, blah. I'm an aspiring watcher.
yeah, because all it does is it rubs people the wrong way. It makes you look like an entitled little shit.
It does.
And sorry, that was a joke. That was me. And like, just be kind and be professional. I think that's the most important thing. Be professional.
Pleasant
And be professional. Yeah.
Yeah. That's good advice. What are your closing words for the people who are looking to switch from like a different career to animation?
I think know that the journey is not going to be easy, right? Like you're going to possibly hit obstacles. You will sometimes feel like you're plateauing and not getting anywhere. But also like it's not impossible, right? Like I've done it. Other people, like there are many people in this industry. Like know that you're not alone, and that everybody went through hardships and obstacles, and that you can make it past those. And if you can make it past those, you will more than likely build the skills to succeed, I guess.
Yeah, and I think a thing that Amanda mentioned earlier too is like, fudge, I was gonna say what you said, but now I forgot. I have like goals. Yeah, believe in yourself, but you like just be sure to like plan and then be smart about it, and anything is possible, right?
Definitely, yeah. Stack the cards in your favor, right? Like, try to make sure that what you're doing is you're working smart, right? Not just working hard, working smart, and yeah. I guess like just work. Just hard.
Yeah. Don't give up and be a pleasant person.
Don't give up. You'll make it.
Yeah, you'll make it. Okay.
But it's also hard.
It's really hard.
This is a competitive field.
It's super competitive. I think that's about it for today then. I just wanted to thank you. I think you gave a lot of really helpful information. And
thank you for having me.
Yeah, I hope this inspires a lot of people to do what you guys really believe in. Life is short, so you should go for it if you really believe in it.
I hope you guys enjoyed this and found some of it helpful or at least entertaining.
It was entertaining.
Thanks for listening. We love hearing from you. Feel free to write us a review on Apple Podcast or other platforms, leave us a comment on YouTube, or just message us on Instagram. If you want to support us, please consider donating on Gumroad. You'll find a link in the description. All right, see you again soon.